She is the award-winning national security, border security investigative reporter for TV, radio, and print media. She is the senior foreign policy advisor for the Committee for Responsible Foreign Policy. She is also a TV correspondent, CW6 News San Diego, as well as One America News Network. And her website is thekdreport.com. Kimberly, how are you?
I'm fine. How about yourself, Chuck?
Doing just fine, and here we are on a little bit different day because things get kind of moved around, and that's fabulous because I have you for like an extra 5 minutes or so.
Well, this is great. I'd like to kind of start off with something that we didn't necessarily talk about prior, but we just learned that this morning, that President Trump has summoned his national security team up to Bedminster, New Jersey, for a meeting because the president is under the impression that we were supposed to be leaving Afghanistan, and he has a renegade staff that just continues to do whatever they want to do, whatever they feel is best, not listening to the president's direction. And his directive was very clear: I want out of Afghanistan 100%. So it hasn't happened yet. So he summoned them up there while he's on vacation. And this, I believe, is very significant. And you're going to be looking at Mr. Bolton and Pompeo trying to convince the president to stay in Afghanistan, even though the talks with the Taliban have failed. And in any event, they didn't even bring the Afghan government in to talk about how the U.S. was going to get out of there. So this is a developing story. And surely there's going to be some news one way or the other by the end of the day before we head into the weekend.
Yeah, I think most Americans think we've already, pulled out mostly from Afghanistan.
No.
Bolton, you and I have talked about Bolton, and sometimes you like him, sometimes you don't. You think he's kind of a loose cannon.
I do. I do.
He should have been in World War II,
Yeah, that might have been a better time for him. He's not focusing on what the President of the United States has directed him to do. The problem with Mr. Bolton is he is tied to a lot of different Republicans, neocons, they're called all kinds of terms, and they're pushing their agenda forward. And of course, this agenda means we need to keep troops all over the world because they think that the American dominance must be protected around the world, whether we have economic interest in these countries or not. And clearly, Afghanistan has always been, dating back thousands of years, is a tribal nation. It is not a country. And they do not want democracy. They do not want the Americans there any longer. And it's time for the president, and he understands going into 2020 here that he made a promise. He wants out of Afghanistan. And a lot of people here in D.C., we support him. And we're pushing our ideas to make sure to let him know that it's okay to get out of there. It'll just go back to being what it was before. And if China or Russia want it, let them have it. Let them have it.
Yeah, and the other problem, which we're going to talk about, is there's a lot of confrontation going on between NATO and, you say, Kurdish clients.
Yep.
It's kind of like a game of chicken. It's kind of strange. All of a sudden, they just pop up. You think things are going pretty smoothly, and then, bam, Here comes Kimberly with bad news. Go ahead.
I'm hoping it's enlightening news, not necessarily bad news. We're trying to get it out there so it doesn't turn into bad news.
But you want to get to Turkey here and what's going on in Turkey and Syria?
Yeah, we can briefly start the discussion on that. There's been a lot of, as the region, the Middle East region continues to be embroiled in war, you're seeing some of the bigger players in the region actually wanting to step up, and they want to be the dominating force within the region. So the countries that are actually probably most likely to take on that role is Iran and Turkey. And Turkey is a NATO ally, and Iran clearly is not a NATO ally. But what you're seeing with Erdogan, who made himself dictator for life in Turkey over the last several years, and by the way, has strangled the media, and there's basically no free media if you're living inside Turkey. the journalists have had to leave the country to try to get the news out that Mr. Erdogan, the president, would love to have a caliphate, and he thinks that he should rule the entire region personally. So that came to a head this week.
We're at the bottom of our hour break. We're going to be back with the one and only Kimberly Dvorak, streaming live on Facebook.
Everybody's talking.
CRN, Chuck Wilder with Kimberly Dvorak, Senior Foreign Policy Advisor for the Committee for Responsible Foreign Policy. And it is thekdreport.com, and she is streaming live on Facebook and Periscope.com and et cetera, et cetera. Isn't it amazing how you kind of think, well, things are kind of calming down except for the Democrats.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden we start getting more turmoil going on in the world.
Yeah.
Does it seem like it's just destined to pop up like that all the time, or every once in a while?
Well, I think, yeah, most definitely. I mean, we got into this latest skirmish here with the Turks over, they decided that they were going to purchase the S-400 missiles from Russia. They're a NATO ally, Russia is not, and the region was, rightfully upset that the Turks were taking this, proactive stance in purchasing these weapons. So they did this. And so the U.S. came back, and our diplomats and lawmakers said, you know what? We're going to put sanctions on you for doing that, Turkey. And then Turkey says, okay. You know what, America? If you want to put sanctions on us, then guess what we're going to do? We're going to just take over the northern parts of Syria altogether. We're going to crush the Syrian army. We're going to wipe out and exterminate, their words, not mine, the Kurds, who happen to be our allies fighting against ISIS. And so the U.S. then has to come back and capitulate to what now is a big mess. And we're talking about the northern Syrian border, which lines itself up with Turkey. And it's no small task to operate and kind of set in place a DMZ zone. But what Turkey is proposing, and the U.S. for the most part is kind of going along with this, is they're saying that they want the safe zone is going to be approximately 20 miles deep into Syria, which means all of the big cities, Idlib and Kobane, those would all be under Turkish rule, not Syrian rule. So you're looking at basically a safe zone is what they want to call it. And the Turks, their main deal with the safe zone is they want to get rid of all of the refugees that are in their country as a result of the Syrian and regional conflicts. And then they're saying, look, this safe zone is going to be perfect because we can deport. And their terms, again, Erdogan says he wants to speed up these deportations and get these Syrians and Yemenis and whomever else is like traveling to Turkey for safe, respite during the entire regional war. I mean, most of the region is under some sort of war or another. So they're talking about, we want to deport all these people out of our country, and we're just going to protect them basically by taking over northern Syria. So basically the U.S. has given their blessing. The U.S. diplomats have given the blessing to Turkey to pretty much, if this unfolds, to take over the complete northern sphere of Syria, which again will put the Kurds in the sights of Turkey, and they would love to get rid of the Kurds altogether, and they're not very quiet about that fact. They're fine saying we'd like to get rid of them.
Almost sounds like immigration control on steroids, doesn't it?
Yeah. So when they call President Trump, an evil racist person for something like that, he's not following through on any of these statements, but the Turkish president, who's actually a dictator for life, we refer to him, and he has no problems doing this. And it's all because he wants to be the caliph. He wants to be the country that runs the entire region. And the only thing in his mind, in his way now, because the wars are all over, the only thing in his way right now is Iran. And so he would like to draw Iran into a regional conflict and hope that NATO would come and help out Turkey, which that would not happen. And that would make, a lot of different players happy that Turkey and Iran begin, a conflict amongst each other. And, the losers in this obviously are the people who live in those countries and they can't, own firearms. I mean, they're very poor. They're, for the most part, uneducated. And these people always bear the brunt of war. And to see that a NATO ally is trying to actually go over and above and cause a war should really be concerning. And, it's a big red flag for NATO, because the one thing to keep in mind in NATO, there have been no rules on if they need to kick somebody out of NATO for being a bad partner, which Turkey is clearly a bad actor in this, but there's nothing written in the rule book for the NATO allies that they can kick out. So it's usually all for one for all, and for the most part, America will do that. But with this situation, with what's going on with Turkey, they won't. They're not going to get involved in it. At least with this president, he will not get involved in this, embroiled in this regional spat.
Doesn't it seem like the Kurds are always getting the wrong end of the stick throughout history?
Yeah. Well, I mean, they want, they reside in northern Iraq for the most part. We saw when ISIS went in, what they did to the Yazidis. They completely, decimated an old religious group. It's mostly, I believe Christian, but they have some other, weird things in there. But I mean, it's, primarily they want to get rid of all of the Jewish people. They want to get rid of the Christians, and they want to have dominance over the region. Now, the region does have oil. It does have natural resources. So, everybody wants their take in this. But, when you have a NATO ally that's being very provocative, and it's kind of like, when there's whack-a-mole, it's like everybody knows how to get America to react. Oh, we're going to bomb these people. Okay, how much money can we give you? Let's get a check. What do you guys need? We did it with Saddam Hussein. We do it with North Korea. We do it with a number of countries. Whenever they threaten that they're going to take military action against someone, it's like, okay, wait a minute, let's give you some money so we can do that. And that's taxpayer money. And we're actually, I guess, paying bribes to countries that aren't even, that would like to see us wiped off the face of this earth.
Yeah. And you mentioned in your column about the United States NATO protecting them if things go badly because the Russians and or Iranians oppose them.
Yeah.
But it's when you talk about killing the Jews, I got this flash in my brain. If you're ready for it, my little tiny brain. Here's Omar over there driving a tank, right? She'd probably just she might even volunteer. We'll
see in all this. I mean, it's the temperature between these four gals and the president has gotten out of control. Yeah. It's pointless to have these arguments because there are some very real problems out there in the Middle East and around the world. Yeah. And the sad thing is about these four gals is that they're hurting progress on getting the border together, keeping our economy afloat, creating jobs, paying down our debt. I mean, their little shenanigans in that. Has any of them put forth a proposal that's going to put Americans back to work, that's going to reduce maybe the amount of money that we put into welfare by saying that if you are on welfare, then you need to take a job or you're not going to get the extra money? None of these gals have done anything other than just really put out some very hateful speech towards the president, towards the people on the right in general, and they scream about this, and they're the ones that are spewing the hate. It's not the other way around, and it's very sad because we are a democracy.
When Netanyahu, says, "Okay, I'm going to boycott the two," it's like people are saying, "Well, listen, you want to boycott Israel, so he'll boycott you."
Yeah.
Just can't take it. What is the old saying? If you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah. But it's sad. Yeah, this shouldn't be the national news cycle right now. That should not be the news cycle, but that is what the news cycle is. And that's sad. And that's sad for Americans.
Talking about issues that, should be at the top, of course, the gun issue, once again. pops up, and I'm telling you, it's like right now. Every time Trump goes out and makes a speech, he's always talking about it's not the gun that does the killing; it's the one that pulls the trigger. It's very obvious, but it's almost like these people just want you to think that the guns have little feet.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's unbelievable.
It is, and when you look over the numbers on firearms and murders and what the numbers in, you look at the big picture, and I did some research. I mean, there were 39,000 gun-related deaths last year. 2/3 of those are from suicides. So I mean, those people, even if you took their gun away, they're going to jump off a bridge. They're going to jump off a building. They're going to slice their whatever, you name it. People that kill themselves are generally committed to killing themselves, especially if they're using a firearm. They're going to do that anyways. So that just brings the number of deaths down as far as what gun violence actually represents for this country. You're more likely to get hit by a train. You're more likely to, unless you're in Chicago, which so far this year they've had 309 murders, primarily black on black murders, but I have not seen the mainstream media jump up and down and say we have to stop that. Baltimore this year, 200 murders already. We haven't even finished the year. New York, roughly 300 people have died this year. Detroit, 400. LA County, which is a big number, but it's because the Los Angeles Police Department refuses to put out the current stats. LA County, according to the Los Angeles Times, 553 murders using firearms. That's a big number. Those are big numbers. I mean, what happened, obviously when people go into store, they're deranged and whatnot, but we're not, the politicians on both sides, they're not very interested in what's happening on a day-to-day basis in these big cities. They just don't care. They see a political, I can raise money off of this, and then they move on down to the road, and nothing ever changes with the gun restrictions, because the majority, if not all of these mass shootings, and they consider a mass shooting 3 or more people, if they're criminals, they weren't allowed to have guns. I mean, like the guy that they arrested up in Dayton, I mean, he had psychotropic drugs in his system. Surprise, surprise. That's usually in most of these mass shooters' system. They're taking, medication that they shouldn't be taking. So you're seeing things like that, but nobody really concerns themselves, I guess, with heart disease and car accidents. More people die in car accidents. Maybe we should take cars away because more people die there. I mean, it's just when you start looking at the numbers and the overall picture, it's less than 1% of the population, and primarily in these large cities, that this is taking place. So I mean, less than 1%. That's the numbers aren't as high as the mainstream media would like you to believe. Yeah. So.
And I'll tell you something else. I just found out yesterday that assault rifles, fully automatic weapons have been banned since the enactment of the National Firearms Act of 1934.
Yep.
We got to ban these assault rifles, AKR. And the AK is named after the manufacturer. It's part of the name or whatever. It's so much false information out there.
Yeah.
But I think you and I know, Kimberly, that collusion didn't work. Of course, if you see what's going on today, apparently they think, now we're going to bring it up again. But this time it's going to be impeachment. And oh my goodness.
Good luck with that. That's all I have to say. Good luck with that, because the president has not been charged. They would have filed charges against him, presumably, after Mueller finished his report. That hasn't come out. We still haven't seen the AG report looking into the FISA abuse, which I think we will start seeing here in the next few months. Unfortunately, I think Trump is playing politics himself with this wants this information to be kind of closely held until it gets closer to the election, because it'll make the Democrats look bad. So, I mean, unfortunately, the president is playing politics with this. We should have had these reports out months ago. But, we here in D.C., we continue to hear, okay, it's going to be out in a few weeks. It's going to be out in a few weeks. And so far, we haven't seen that. But, you have to presume that the government and main justice here in D.C. is doing their job, looking into if there was any abuses. And, and if there were, these people need to be prosecuted, because this is something, they talk about election tampering. If you politicize the law enforcement or the judicial branch of the government, then you're not a country anymore. In essence, you're just like another banana republic out there, because at least people, for the most part, believe that if they go to court that they'll get a fair trial, or if they go, but right now it's just, the free reign government and these bureaucrats, it's mostly these bureaucrats that are put into place. And with the population and the numbers growing within these agencies, you're seeing, it makes it harder to manage. And you're seeing a lot more issues out there where, I don't agree with that, so I'm going to veto that, send it back 6 departments, and nothing gets done. Nothing gets done. Everybody has meetings in D.C. They all love to have meetings. Meetings isn't actually working, though. They don't want to work. They don't want to do the work, so they go to meetings. That's kind of the big joke here in D.C.
Yeah, or their chance to go in and put up some prop.
Yeah.
Look what I came up with.
Yeah.
We're going to take a break, and then we'll be back. More from Kimberly Dvorak, TV correspondent, CW6 News San Diego, One American News Network, and she is the Senior Foreign Policy Advisor for the Committee for Responsible Foreign Policy, and her website is the KD Report. And she streams live on Periscope.com and Facebook. A little bit later on, it'll be on YouTube. We'll be right back. Chuck Wilder, CRN, my guest, Kimberly Dvorak. And Kimberly started out this portion about 39,000 gun-related deaths per year, right? And so then we got, 68,000 die from drug overdoses. That's twice as many. Okay, So we got to outlaw drug and overdoses. Let's see, 80,000. Here's a good one. Get ready to get your signs up. 80,000 people dying each year from the flu. So we're going to have to ban the flu. 40,000 people dying because of traffic fatalities. So now we got to ban the cars. Boy, they sure got their priorities, don't they? I'm going to tell you what you mentioned. Robbery, death, rape, assaults are all done by criminals. And it's ludicrous to think that criminals are going to obey laws, and that's why they're called criminals. And the old saying that I got a long time ago is, when you outlaw guns, then only outlaws will have guns.
Yes. And I'll say something else, that disarming a population leads to an oppressive government. And also, in the words of Thomas Jefferson, he said way back when, "No free man shall ever be debarred the use of arms. The Constitution is and in most of our states assert that all power is inherent to the people, that they may exercise it by themselves, that it is their right and their duty to be armed at all times." So there it's Jefferson. So I guess we're going to have to ban Jefferson. They're actually working on his monument out here. Maybe they just need to take down the monument with him. But that's kind of the scary thing with firearms. When you put it in context, then it's not necessarily the headlines. In the media, typically, if it bleeds, it leads. But the way they're going about, they have not said in any of these cases, that in recent memory, that any of these people that committed these mass shootings did so by going, and getting they were, would have prevented them if they didn't have access to guns, because criminals will always have access to guns. And if you disarm the population, they're just going to know exactly where to go to commit robbery, rape, and murder.
And I'll tell you something, and especially for the listeners, because Kimberly knows this because she filed it in this report. Of all the people that are dying, and I didn't even want to bring this up, okay, is 630,000 people die a year from heart disease. So now we're going to have to go after, especially out in California, In-N-Out.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
Hamburgers going.
Craving that so much.
I didn't want to bring it up. I'm going to protest. No. I mean, there's your big figure right there. 630,000 compared to 39,000 gun deaths.
Yeah.
But
it is. And when you put it in context, and, and this is why I think everybody says, okay, we're going to do stronger background check. We're going to put all these regulations on it. In the majority of these states where these mass shootings have taken place are in the states that have the toughest gun laws in the entire country. So clearly they aren't working.
Look at Chicago. Yep. Chicago.
Yeah.
Perfect example.
Yeah.
Hey, and by the way, when you disarm the people, see, that's the first step to going totally socialist. Like Venezuela, I think it was 6 months before they decided to ruin the beautiful country by disarming the citizens 6 months before.
Bingo.
Kimberly, we just got run out of time here. So the KDReport.com, and this report's going to be up just a little bit later on YouTube, right?
Yes, it will be.
All right, and I'll get together and find out what day we're doing next week, because things kind of switching around. But that's good. Sometimes good is bad, and sometimes bad is good, right? So it's like, right? I don't know. Thank you very much.
Have a good
I
weekend.
appreciate it.